Hey everyone, welcome to a new episode of Code and Pixel Podcast. My name is Ada Kuhnlein, and I'm joined by my co-host Kelly. Who are we talking to today?
Hey, Adekunle. Today we are joined by Crystal Ledesma. Crystal, how are you doing?
Doing really well. How are you two?
We're doing good. We're supposed to get a snowstorm randomly. So we're just making sure we have plenty of hot cocoa and frozen pizzas.
It's the opposite here. It's actually 50 degrees in New York. It's like I was like outside with a t-shirt, so it's like the complete opposite, which is weird because usually New York is like this is actually the coldest month, but it's been pretty pleasant overall.
So, Crystal, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your role at Zillow, and how you got there?
Yeah, so I've been with Zillow. I just hit my 6 years in November. Currently, senior engineering manager for the design system team. We're called Constellation. I've heard there's another constellation out there, and we did that name before we knew that. So, we'll see if we stick with it. We probably will, but you never know. And that was a role that kicked off, I think, in fall. Is when I became senior engineering manager, and that came because we expanded beyond the web platform. We now have native apps and email in our wheelhouse.
That's awesome. And have you always kind of been in the design system space, or have you had other roles leading up to this?
Yeah, I actually started, like, if you go way back to when I went to school and exited and took a break after I got my associates in graphic design, I actually became a receptionist and admin assistant. And I did that for a while. Just, I was taking a break. And then decided to go back to school after I realized that coding websites was actually a job you can get paid for. I didn't really realize that at the time. That might date myself. I didn't realize that was a job. So I went back to school, finished my bachelor's, and ended up as a developer. I did some front end web, but mostly email, actually, because most people didn't want to do it. So I took it on. That's how I started, but did front end email development for a while, a little bit of design hybrid because I had that graphic design background for groups that just needed that support for design as well. But really, my desire was to be in development, and so that's how I ended up where I'm at now. Design systems came about just because I was trying to multiply myself, especially in the email world. Everybody needed someone to do email, and no one really wanted to do it, and so things kept coming across my desk. I'm like, I can't possibly do all the things. How can I really help others to do this with just me? And the concept of design systems is something I ran across just in my reading on the internet, and realized, hey, I really could use that model here. And also, I'm really into this. And so it just kind of spiraled from there, and here I am.
Yeah, that's super interesting because I know doing email development in the past, and it's probably one of the more challenging things to do. So kudos for you to like make that into your career and also be good at it. I'm wondering like what is like the current setup of like the design system team at Zillow right now? And then can you kind of talk about what are some of the challenges you as a group are facing right now?
Yeah, so today we're about a few years into our current design system. I'll give some context before. With Zillow having so many lines of business under our umbrella. So, for folks who are not familiar, there's of course Zillow.com. Zillow offers also Zillow home loans, and that's considered a separate entity. There's rentals, just homes to buy that you can search on the site. We also work with agents under a business called Premier Agent, which is our B2B side. So that's a lot of different things happening all under the Zillow umbrella. And everybody was very much operating in their lane. And that ended up meaning lots of design systems were cropping up, even within the same company. And a few folks figured that was going on and realized, hey, we should probably consolidate because we're trying to accomplish a lot of similar goals here with these design systems. And we came up with Constellation a few years ago. I want to say it's maybe 3 years now. I think something like that. So where we're at now is consolidating more. There's still a few in the wild that we're still trying to partner with and bring into the fold. but that's where we're at now. And it was definitely the web platform that we focused on. Um, as I mentioned, it was really, I would say, late last year is when we got native apps in the fold. Native app teams were very much focused on kind of a federated model of design systems, which was working okay for them, but they realized we really need to centralize and bring it in with the web because experiences, when someone interacts with Zillow, it's all Zillow to them. It doesn't matter if they're on their phone, on their computer, whatever it is. So realized we need to bring that into the fold. And then email was always part of our design system, but it was definitely a skeleton crew of one developer. I used to help with that side, was able to hire someone, and then we hired a designer. But the email ecosystem at Zillow is so huge. Um, Email drives a lot of traffic to our site, and we realize we really need some more support there. And so I really think now that we've expanded, we have 3 dedicated email developers and 2 dedicated designers and 1 designer who we're kind of like borrowing at the moment. So that's going on too. So that we're looking very big now as a design system team. That's where we're at today. Um, but I would say each platform itself, because we did our approach as our design system as the web platform first, that's a little bit further along than the other 2.
That's so surprising to me. I had no idea that email was such a big factor in like how you build up a design system team at Zillow. It's super interesting and it makes me grateful that I don't work in the email development anymore because I know it can get frustrating because you're all these cool things you can do on the web these days and you're kind of limited when it comes to email. So, Crystal, I was wondering, you mentioned you're a manager now at Zillow. How and when did you know that you wanted to move into management?
That is an excellent question. I never knew I wanted to, I'll admit. So this is something that came about in conversation with my manager at the time, asking me, have I ever considered managing before? And I really didn't. And I feel like that's kind of a theme in my career in general is like, have you ever considered email? When I started coding, I was looking at front end, like, no, I've never considered that. Have you ever considered managing? No, I've never considered that. So I kind of just was like, well, let me think about it. And my manager at the time recommended me this great book by Julie Zoe, who wrote The Making of a Manager. And he said, check it out, read it, see what you think. And I was reading it. And really, there's a lot of great nuggets out of that book. But one of the major ones was, what do you feel more passionate about? Is it about your individual contribution or is it about the larger outcomes? And I was like, I really do care about the outcome. I love the IC work. Every once in a while I'm like, oh, the devs are doing this, the engineers are doing this. That's so cool. How'd you do that? But I have to kind of dial it back, go back to the outcome. And it's really helping advocate and drive outcomes on behalf of the team and really rallying them and rallying for them so we can make those outcomes happen is what led me to management.
That's awesome. I love that you broke it down into like what each type of role focuses on and outcomes and contribution. I love that. So you mentioned earlier about hiring and building out a team. I'm curious when you're looking to hire, what do you look for in terms of hiring hybrid tech folks, design, engineering, and those skill sets?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of things. Thinking about it is really, any engineer or developer that has an interest in design, whether or not they've done it themselves, when they really care about it, that's a big factor in when I hire. Um, and especially if they have the mindset of describing development or engineering almost like solving a puzzle, because I really do notice that mindset of approach of I want to solve this problem essentially, or I want to help make this design happen. And even if I don't know the answer, I want to figure that out. That's another factor I really look for. And then I would say specifically being on a design system team, knowing that engineers are going to work with designers. How do they interact with designers and do they have a curiosity in their approach in general when working with others and especially designers because we're directly supporting, collaborating? I would say those are the 3 major ones. And then aside from that, really just the I would say soft skill side of, are you interested in having conversations and being curious? Because I think that not only goes into each engineer's individual work, but in their collaboration with designers on the design system team and in collaboration with all the people consuming the system. You have to be really curious about people and what problems they're trying to solve. So I would say that's like the non-technical side I'm looking for.
Yeah, I love how you explain the collaboration with designers because I think that's kind of a skill you can't really learn. It's like something that you just kind of have to like, or learn before you actually work because something that you have to kind of like build up to. And I think from like talking to a lot of engineers, they always like trying to figure out how to like when to push back and or when to kind of like push forward things with a designer. But I have like a hypothetical question for you next. Let's say like some reason the design system team at Zillow is like gone, like disappears. Or they're working on the stuff, and you had to like start a design system from scratch. Can you talk about like what are like the top like 3 role you were like hired for and like why?
Yeah. So I think the first 2 might be a little bit obvious, but a designer and an engineer. Those 2, hand in glove. We need both, absolutely. And especially if they have an interest in a little bit of dabbling in dev or a little bit of dabbling in design, when we're just starting, that would be really key, being small and scrappy. The third, and I say this very selfishly, probably as a manager, is a dedicated PM. The scrappiness of design systems, at least in my experience so far, don't always have a dedicated PM for the beginning, but it's such a big part of the work. So when you think about what a PM does as far as like the process operations, gathering information, helping with clarity amongst partners that are consuming the system, it's just a lot of organizational execution on the day to day that you just need on a design system team. And when there isn't a dedicated PM available, you start to feel that pretty quickly. And I will add, to be completely fair to team members, if you're focusing on design, you're focusing on engineering, PMing stuff isn't necessarily in your wheelhouse. And it's great that people can contribute to that if they can as an IC as a designer engineer, but it's just not something people come in knowing or having. And that's where I see a PM really being able to unlock the strength of process as a design system team. So that would be my third. I'm like, we have one right now. I really want another one. So I'm working on that. But yeah, PM, I'm like, to help make it happen in collaboration with other partners within the business.
Wow, I'm actually kind of shocked that you mentioned PM. It's like something I never thought of because actually I never really worked with a PM on a design system. So, and looking back, I can kind of see like the importance of it, especially when there's a discussion between like, should it be an epic? Should it be like a ticket? Should it be all this stuff? And I was like, I don't honestly care about it. So I think that's where a PM would be a great addition to that. Um, cool.
Totally. Yeah, it's just like a different thing for your mind to think about, right? And it's like a context switch, and that can be very heavy cognitively to individuals on the team that may be just thinking about like, what's the actual engineering architecture or approach to this, or what is the actual visual design and how it ties with their branding, or that's a whole other thing. Absolutely. And understandably, like, I don't want to wrap my head around this, or I can't really right now. It's hard. And that's why I say PM.
Love it. Yeah. So we talked about like the hypotho like situation. So I'm wondering, like, let's say, like if you want to evaluate someone's performance, like in the design system space, because I know it can be hard because you're technically working on a product that serves products. So, like, how do you typically like evaluate performance? Is it based on like how many components you ship, or is it based on like just like sentiments from colleagues and partners? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so there is an entire approach to performance in general, of course, as any company does at Zillow. Um, on the system team itself, we do add the lens of is the work being done in alignment with our team goals, our charter, our principles? And it's really about that. I think one of the challenges when I think about evaluating performance by number of components shipped, for example, I don't think that tells the full story. There's other factors that go into the work from day to day. Business goals overall may have changed. And so we pivoted what we're focusing on as a design system team. There may be things like we're trying to roll something out and it turns out it's not going to quite work for the consumers of the design system. So we have to regroup. I speak from experience on that. So that might affect how many we're able to ship, et cetera. So it's really based on, is the work being done in alignment with what we're trying to do as a team and going from there. And, additional bonus points for when folks really kind of focus in on that collaborative spirit as a design system team member as well. That's very much, we call it the what and the how, the what being how you execute the work, like the work itself, that design or that code and how you approach that versus the how, which is how do you interact with everybody every day? How do you show up? How do you collaborate? And it's a mix of those two and in context with whatever is going on in the environment around us in the business.
Yeah, I love that you bring up collaboration and alignment. I think that's so important when thinking through a systems mindset. I think some of us were so focused on the task at hand, we kind of just go heads down, and we need to take a moment sometimes and just go, what are we actually building and what are we delivering to our users? And so I love that focus on team spirit and working together. You've mentioned before about you have a background of both design and development. And so I'm wondering, what are some of the main skills managers should having when it comes to managing hybrid ICs?
Yeah. I think when it comes to hybrid ACs, it's really a matter of thinking about their strength areas and passion areas. I think one of the hardest things being a hybrid contributor is, oh, both are so fun usually to us. But really what's like unlocking your passion most and being able to have those conversations with those contributors, because I think those conversations will ultimately lead to seeing what drives each person and aligning them to the type of work that drives them, because that's really, well, one, it's going to be more fulfilling for any contributor, but also that's going to make the work that the outcomes that they come up with more impactful because they're passionate about it. And I think that's the key. Of course, being hybrid, you're going to have to balance a little bit of both, right? But is there a way to, let's say you have multiple hybrid ICs, can you focus maybe someone that skews a little bit more design oriented, more projects there, and someone who's more dev oriented, more projects there? Or maybe really is an IC who's hybrid who sees the bridge between the two, and maybe you don't have a PM and they lean a little more process oriented, so you focus them a little there. I think it's all about getting to know each individual, what drives them, and balancing what they focus on accordingly. And that would be my recommendation for a manager of hybrids.
Yeah, tailoring to what your strengths are, I think, is so important in making sure people feel empowered in terms of their career growth and impact. And so I think those are great points to bring up. And so when it comes to managing hybrids, you're lucky enough to have that background, but let's say maybe you've only managed designers. Now you're hiring your first design technologist, or maybe you're an engineering manager and you're hiring a design technologist as well. How can someone who is maybe unfamiliar with the other side of things, how can they be a more effective manager and kind of take on something that they haven't experienced before?
Yeah, I really would recommend being curious. I know I've mentioned curiosity earlier, and I think that really applies here too. If it's hiring a role with a discipline that you don't have familiarity with, getting curious about the basics of that discipline. I don't think you have to go deep diving into the info. I mean, that's really what you're hiring for. You're hiring an expert in that area, but knowing basics is important so you can be able to have conversations with folks that you're trying to hire. Once you make that hire, continue the conversation as your direct report and be able to know how to advocate for them and be able to support them in their work. So it's all about curiosity and making the time to get that info. I'm thinking about myself specifically right now in the sense that I hired some native apps engineers, and native is not my area. I've done development work, but not for apps. So it's not my wheelhouse. I really had to be curious about the basics so I can understand what kind of challenges they may face and what they're trying to accomplish and be able to better support those team members.
Yeah, I love the idea of like uh, you're hiring for the discipline, but you just want to basically empower folks and understand like their work from a high level, which I think is always important. Um, cool. Wondering like, let's say someone is trying to become a manager, but also like become a manager of like these like hybrid ICs. What is like one piece of advice would you give to them, especially if they're just like someone that's like freshly new to management overall?
I gotta go back in my brain of when I first became a manager to see what I think. I think honestly, really getting to know each individual. That may sound kind of generic, but I think that's really important if you're just becoming a manager and you're managing hybrid ICs, like just getting to know each person on an individual level. I think I have kind of this philosophy of people first, the work comes after. It's really about each person and what drives them and what's going to unlock their abilities to bring their best selves to work every day. And it's really all about that as a manager first and foremost. The work itself and thinking about managing hybrid ACs and what are they going to do and what's the work output that comes after. I think you can really build consensus and a stronger team if you're focusing on the person first, each individual.
Yeah, I love that. I always think that like people are the foundation of like whatever you do, regardless if it's like team members or you're building a product for someone. So I kind of always think about like people before profit, but I like your idea of like uh but yeah. So closing it out, if someone wants to like find you on the internet, where could they go?
Well, right now, Twitter is probably the best place. It's at Sent by Crystal. And then I do have crystalledesma.com, but I accidentally let that domain expire. And so all my stuff is gone. And I'm in the middle of bringing that back. So it just says hello world from WordPress, but that should be fixed in the next month or two. But definitely Twitter for now or LinkedIn.
Oh, thanks for reminding me. I think I have to renew my domain, so I'll make sure I do that today. Um,
Yeah.
and then yeah, is there anything you want to plug before we close out?
Uh, Nothing in particular, really, but I just want to say thanks to you both for this opportunity to chat with you, and especially getting the opportunity to kind of reflect on management, which is very different than individual contributor work, and it's been nice to reflect on it and really think about the key drivers and what I might share from my own perspective. So thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks again for coming along onto this episode. Again, if anyone's interested to learn more about Code and Pixels, definitely go to codeandpixels.fm and follow us on Twitter too. Um, I guess that's it. See y'all later.